The sound of fabric tearing cut through the elegant murmur of the Grand View Country Club's annual charity gala like a knife through silk. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" Victoria Ashford's voice dripped with theatrical concern as she held the torn piece of midnight blue fabric in her perfectly manicured hands. "You really should be more careful where you're standing, sweetheart. These events aren't exactly your usual environment, are they?" Diana stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable as she looked down at the deliberate rip running from her hip to the hem of her dress. The same dress she'd spent 3 months' salary on 5 years ago, back when every dollar mattered. The same dress she'd worn to her first major presentation. The same dress that had witnessed her transformation from struggling to surviving to something Victoria Ashford couldn't begin to comprehend. "My name is Diana Mitchell, and at 34 years old, I'd learned that silence often speaks louder than outrage, especially when you're a black woman in spaces where people like Victoria assume you're there to serve, not to belong." "It's fine," Diana replied quietly, her voice carrying none of the storm. Brewing behind her calm exterior, Victoria's friends, 3 women whose combined jewelry could probably fund a small hospital, giggled behind their champagne flutes. They stood in a tight circle near the dessert table, their designer gowns creating a barrier of privilege and presumption. "I mean, honestly, the help should really use the service entrance," Victoria continued, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "It's so awkward when they try to blend in with actual guests. No offense, of course." Diana had arrived at the gala 30 minutes earlier, her invitation embossed with gold lettering tucked safely in her clutch. She'd walked through the main entrance, past the ice sculptures and the string quartet, feeling the familiar weight of eyes that saw her skin before they saw anything else. The Grandview Country Club represented everything Diana had fought against her entire life. Its marble floors had been walked by generations of families whose wealth was so old it had forgotten its own origins. The portraits lining the walls showed faces that all looked remarkably similar, pale, privileged, and perpetually pleased with themselves. "Victoria, maybe we should..." Her friends started, her discomfort finally breaking through the champagne haze. "Should what, Jennifer? I'm just being honest. Look at her dress. It's clearly not from this season, probably not even designer. I'm actually trying to help her avoid further embarrassment." What Victoria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Diana had been watching her for weeks, not in person, but through carefully compiled reports, financial statements, and a particularly interesting series of emails that had found their way to Diana's desk 3 months ago. The torn dress wasn't an accident. Victoria Ashford didn't do accidents. She did calculated cruelty, the kind that came from a lifetime of never facing consequences, the kind that assumed everyone would simply accept their place in her carefully ordered world. Diana's phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from Marcus, her attorney. "Everything ready on our end. Just say the word." She'd known this moment would come eventually. When you spend your career dismantling systems of inequality, you learn to recognize the architects of those systems. Victoria Ashford wasn't just a wealthy socialite with too much time and too little empathy. She was the CEO of Ashford Development Group, the company currently facing a discrimination lawsuit that Diana had been building for 18 months. But Victoria didn't recognize her. Why would she? To Victoria, Diana was just another black woman in a room full of servers. The fact that Diana held an executive position at the city's most prestigious civil rights law firm, that she'd argued cases before federal judges, that her face had been featured in legal journals, none of that registered. Victoria saw what she expected to see. "You know what? I'll even pay for the dry cleaning," Victoria said, pulling out her wallet with exaggerated generosity. "Here's $40. That should more than cover it for a dress like that." The bills fluttered to the floor between them. Diana didn't move to pick them up. Instead, she met Victoria's eyes with a look that made the other woman's smile falter for just a fraction of a second. "That's very kind of you," Diana said softly, "but I don't think dry cleaning will be necessary." Something in her tone made Victoria's friends exchange glances. Jennifer took a small step backward, her social survival instincts apparently sharper than Victoria's. "Well, suit yourself," Victoria shrugged, already turning away. "I tried to help. Some people just don't know how to accept kindness." As Victoria walked away, her laughter echoing across the marble floors, Diana pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced precision, sending a single message to Marcus: "Monday morning, file everything." The thing about revenge, real revenge, the kind that actually matters, is that it requires patience. It requires watching and waiting and building your case brick by brick until the structure is so solid that nothing can tear it down. Diana had learned that lesson the hard way, through years of watching people like Victoria destroy lives with casual cruelty and walk away unscathed. But this time would be different. Diana glanced around the gala, noting the faces she recognized from her research. Board members, investors, city council representatives, all of them here, all of them witnesses to Victoria's casual racism, and all of them about to discover that the waitress they'd ignored was actually the lead attorney on the biggest discrimination case their city had seen in a decade. The torn dress hung awkwardly from her hip, a visible reminder of Victoria's assumption that some people simply didn't belong. Diana smoothed the fabric with one hand, her mind already 3 steps ahead, already seeing how this moment would play out in a courtroom, in depositions, in the court of public opinion. She'd spent 5 years building her reputation, 5 years proving that excellence couldn't be ignored, even when people desperately wanted to ignore it. 5 years collecting stories from people who'd been dismissed, degraded and destroyed by companies like Ashford Development Group. And now, standing in the middle of the Grandview Country Club, with a torn dress and $40 scattered at her feet, Diana felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Absolute certainty. Victoria Ashford had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She just didn't know it yet. As Diana walked toward the exit, leaving the money on the floor where it had fallen, she caught her reflection in one of the club's ornate mirrors. The torn dress, the calm expression, the quiet dignity that Victoria had mistaken for submission. If you're enjoying this story of justice and vindication, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will redefine everything Victoria Ashford thought she knew about power, privilege, and the price of underestimating the wrong person. The real question wasn't whether Diana would get her revenge. The question was whether Victoria would still be standing when the dust finally settled. Diana's apartment was quiet when she finally returned home, the torn dress draped over her arm like a battle scar. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom in a neighborhood that real estate agents called emerging, code for not quite gentrified yet. The contrast between her home and the Grandview Country Club couldn't have been sharper. She hung the dress carefully in her closet, next to the growing collection of professional armor she'd accumulated over the years. Each piece told a story: the gray suit she'd worn to her first courtroom victory, the navy blazer that had seen her through countless depositions, the black dress from her mother's funeral when she'd promised herself that struggle would not define her legacy. Her phone lit up with notifications. The first was from her best friend and colleague Simone. "Girl, tell me you didn't actually go to that gala. Those people are toxic." The second made her pause. It was a screenshot from Instagram, posted 20 minutes ago by Victoria Ashford herself. The image showed Victoria and her friends, champagne glasses raised, with a caption that made Diana's jaw tighten. "Another successful charity event. Though I must say the service staff really needs better training. Some people just don't understand their place. Charity gala, a Grandview life. Know your worth." The comments were already rolling in. Dozens of laughing emojis, friends agreeing. Someone even wrote, "OMG. Victoria, you're so right. The help these days has zero boundaries. Diana sat on her couch, staring at the post. This wasn't just casual cruelty anymore. This was documentation, evidence, a public declaration of the exact attitude that had destroyed countless careers at Ashford Development Group. Her mind drifted back to a conversation she'd had 6 months ago with a woman named Patricia Chen. Patricia had worked as a project manager at Ashford Development for 3 years before being fired for cultural misfit, Victoria's preferred term for anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of acceptable. She called me into her office and told me that clients felt uncomfortable with my accent, Patricia had said, her voice shaking even months after the incident. I was born in Sacramento. I don't have an accent. What she meant was that clients felt uncomfortable with my face. Patricia's case had been the first domino. Then came Marcus Thompson, no relation to Diana's attorney, an African-American architect who'd been passed over for promotion 5 times, despite having the highest client satisfaction ratings in the company. Then Jamal Williams, who'd been accused of aggressive behavior after he'd politely disagreed with Victoria in a meeting. Then Rosa Martinez, then David Kim, then 12 others whose stories formed a pattern so clear it was practically a confession. 18 months of interviews, 18 months of gathering emails, performance reviews and witness statements, 18 months of building an ironclad case while Victoria Ashford continued to operate with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Diana's phone rang. Marcus, her attorney, and the strategic mind behind their legal approach. I saw the Instagram post, he said without preamble. Please tell me you got that in writing. Screenshot saved, Diana confirmed, along with about 40 witnesses who saw her tear my dress and throw money at me. Diana, Marcus's voice carried a warning. Tell me you didn't provoke this. I stood in a room I had every right to be in, wearing a dress I paid for with my own money. If that's provocation, then we've already proven our case. There was a pause. Then Marcus laughed, the sound carrying equal parts admiration and concern. You know she's going to come after you hard when she realizes who you are. You let her. But the bravado felt hollow once she hung up. Diana walked to her bathroom and finally looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. The carefully applied makeup couldn't quite hide the exhaustion. The professional polish couldn't erase the weight of carrying other people's pain alongside her own. She thought about her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to put Diana through college, who'd cleaned houses for families like the Ashfords, coming home with stories about casual cruelty delivered with smiles, who'd told Diana over and over, "Baby, you get your education, you make sure you're the one with the power to say no." Her mother had died 2 years ago, never getting to see Diana argue her first major case. Never getting to see her daughter become exactly what she'd sacrificed everything to create, someone who couldn't be dismissed, couldn't be ignored, couldn't be paid off with $40 and a condescending smile. The next morning, Diana woke to 17 missed calls. The first voicemail was from Simone. Diana, Victoria Ashford is on a rampage. She's posting about you on every platform. You need to see this. Diana opened Instagram with a sense of inevitability. Victoria had posted again, this time with a longer caption. A PSA, if you're going to crash events you weren't invited to, at least have the decency to dress appropriately. Last night's incident was a perfect example of why certain standards exist. Not everyone belongs everywhere, and that's okay. We all have our place in society. Your truth the standards, but just class matters. The post had over 3,000 likes, but it was the comments that revealed Victoria's true nature. She'd responded to several, each reply more damning than the last. Jennifer KNYC, exactly. Some people need to learn. Boundaries, Victoria's reply. It's not even about race, it's about class. But of course they always make it about race. Bradley Finance. Did you get her removed from the venue? Victoria's reply. Didn't need to. She left on her own once she realized she was out of her depth. Probably went back to whatever restaurant she actually works at. Diana forwarded every screenshot to Marcus. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the Ashford development case files. 15 depositions scheduled for the next 3 weeks. 23 plaintiffs ready to testify. 4 years of financial records showing systematic pay disparities. Internal emails that would make a jury's blood boil. And now, thanks to Victoria's inability to control her own arrogance, they had real-time evidence of the exact mindset that had created the discrimination in the first place. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Patricia Chen. "Diana, I just saw Victoria Ashford's posts. Is that you she's talking about? Are you okay?" Before Diana could respond, another text came through. Then another. Within an hour, all 23 plaintiffs had reached out, their messages ranging from concern to outrage to something that looked a lot like hope. Jamal Williams wrote, "She has no idea who you are, does she? This is going to be beautiful." Diana allowed herself a small smile. No, Victoria had no idea. She'd spent the last 12 hours publicly humiliating someone she assumed was powerless, never bothering to ask questions, never considering that the waitress might be the same attorney whose name appeared on the lawsuit that could destroy everything Victoria had built. That afternoon, Diana received an email that made her pause. It was from the Grandview Country Club's event. "Coordinator, dear Ms. Mitchell, it has come to our attention that there was an incident at last night's gala involving you and one of our longtime members. We take all complaints seriously and would like to offer you a complimentary membership for 1 year as an apology for any discomfort you may have experienced. Please understand that we value all our guests and strive to maintain an environment of respect and dignity. Sincerely, Robert Pemberton, Events Director." Diana read it twice, then forwarded it to Marcus with a single word. "Interesting." His response came immediately. "They're trying to buy your silence before they realize you don't need their membership. You need their testimony." She was drafting a carefully worded response when her doorbell rang. Diana opened it to find a delivery person holding an enormous bouquet of white roses. The card read, "My sincerest apologies. For any misunderstanding, let's put this unfortunate incident behind us. Victoria Ashford." Diana stared at the flowers, then at the card, then back at the flowers. The audacity was almost impressive. Victoria had spent hours publicly mocking her, had posted content that would make any HR department panic, had demonstrated exactly the kind of discriminatory attitude that formed the basis of a federal lawsuit. And now she was sending flowers. Not an actual apology, not an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a vague misunderstanding and an assumption that Diana would simply accept this token gesture and disappear. Diana took a photo of the flowers and the card, added them to her evidence folder, and then did something that surprised even herself. She called Victoria Ashford directly. The phone rang 3 times before Victoria answered, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who expects gratitude. "Hello? Ms. Ashford, this is Diana Mitchell. I wanted to thank you for the flowers." There was a pause. "Oh, well, I'm glad you appreciate the gesture. Like I said, just a silly misunderstanding. No hard feelings, right?" "Actually," Diana said, her voice perfectly pleasant, "I was wondering if we could meet for coffee this week. I think we have quite a bit to discuss." "Coffee?" Victoria sounded surprised but pleased. "Well, I suppose I could make time. Though I have to say, I'm quite busy with work. I run a major development company, you know." "Yes," Diana replied. "I know exactly what you do, Miss Ashford. How about Tuesday at 10? There's a lovely cafe near the courthouse." "The courthouse?" Victoria laughed. "Bit of an odd location, but sure. I'll have my assistant send you the details of a better place, somewhere more appropriate." After they hung up, Diana sat in silence, the white roses mocking her from their crystal vase. Victoria still had no idea. Even after a direct phone call, even after Diana had given her name, Victoria remained so convinced of her own assumptions that she couldn't see what was right in front of her. The woman, who'd torn her dress wasn't just racist. She was dangerously, willfully blind to anything that contradicted her worldview. And that blindness was about to cost her everything. Diana opened her laptop and began typing an email to Marcus. Meeting scheduled with VA for Tuesday. She still doesn't know. Prepare the full presentation. I want her to see every single piece of evidence before we file on Monday. As she hit send, Diana caught her reflection in the darkened computer screen. The exhaustion was still there, but something else had joined it. A cold, calculated determination that her mother would have recognized immediately. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. But if justice happened to feel satisfying, well, that was just a bonus. Outside her window, the city continued its evening rhythm, unaware that in a modest apartment in an emerging neighborhood, a case was being built that would shake the foundations of one of its most prominent families. Unaware that Victoria Ashford's world was about to collapse, one carefully documented Instagram post at a time. The only question now was whether Victoria would recognize the danger before it was too late, or if her arrogance would blind her until the very moment the hammer fell. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharper, more defined. Diana stood outside Café Luminosa, a small establishment 3 blocks from the federal courthouse, watching Victoria's Mercedes pull up to the curb 20 minutes late. Victoria emerged wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than Diana's monthly rent, her phone pressed to her ear. No, tell them we're not negotiating. If they don't like our offer, they can find another developer. I don't have time for people who don't understand how business works. She ended the call and finally acknowledged Diana with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sorry about that. Crisis at work. You know how it is. She paused, looking Diana up and down. Well, maybe you don't. Anyway, shall we? Inside the cafe, Victoria ordered a complicated drink involving oat milk and 3 specific temperature requirements, then settled into her chair with the air of someone doing charity work. So, Diana, was it? I'm glad you reached out. I think it's important that we clear the air about Saturday night. I agree, Diana said simply, her coffee black and straightforward. Look, I'll be honest with you. Victoria leaned forward conspiratorially. I've been thinking about our little encounter, and I realize I may have come across as harsh. But you have to understand, people in my position deal with a lot of boundary issues. You wouldn't believe how many people try to network their way into events they weren't invited to. Diana took a sip of her coffee. I was invited. Victoria's smile flickered. Well, yes, I'm sure the catering company gave you some sort of access pass, but I received a formal invitation. Gold. Embossed. Sent to my office address. Your office? Victoria's tone shifted slightly, curiosity mixing with condescension. And where do you work exactly? I'm an attorney, civil rights law, primarily employment discrimination cases. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Diana. It counted. Oh. Victoria recovered quickly, her smile returning but tighter now. Well, that's interesting. Good for you. I'm sure that's very fulfilling work, helping people and all that. It is, Diana agreed, especially when the cases are clear-cut, when there's a pattern of discriminatory behavior so obvious that even a first-year law student could win the case. Victoria's fingers tightened around her cup. I'm sure. Though I have to say, from my experience running a major company, these discrimination claims are usually just disgruntled employees looking for a payout, people who couldn't cut it professionally and need someone to blame. Is that what you think happened with Patricia Chen? The name landed like a stone in still water. Victoria's expression froze, then rearranged itself into careful neutrality. I'm sorry, who? Patricia Chen. She worked for Ashford Development Group as a project manager, fired for cultural misfit after 3 years of exemplary performance reviews. Victoria set down her cup with deliberate precision. I don't discuss personnel matters with strangers in coffee shops. What about Jamal Williams, Marcus Thompson, Rosa? Martinez? David Kim? Diana's voice remained pleasant, conversational. Do you discuss them? Who are you? Victoria's voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. I told you. I'm an attorney specializing in employment discrimination, and as of Monday morning, I'll be the lead counsel on a federal lawsuit against Ashford Development Group, representing 23 plaintiffs who all have remarkably similar stories about their time working for you. The color drained from Victoria's face, then returned in an angry flush. You set me up. Saturday night, the dress. You planned all of this. I planned to attend a charity gala I was invited to. You planned to humiliate someone you assumed was beneath you. There's a difference. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. Please do. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear about your Instagram posts from this weekend, particularly the one about knowing your place and not everyone belongs everywhere. That's going to play beautifully in front of a jury. You can't use social media posts in a lawsuit. Actually, I can, especially when they demonstrate a pattern of discriminatory attitudes from the CEO of the company being sued. Your lawyers will explain it to you, probably right before they explain how much this is going to cost you. Victoria grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with rage. You think you're clever? You think you can come after me and my company with some sob stories from employees who couldn't handle the pressure of a competitive workplace? I have the best legal team in the state. I'm sure you do. I'm looking forward to meeting them in court. This is extortion. You're trying to shake me down for a settlement. Diana stood meeting Victoria's eyes with perfect calm. Ms. Ashford, if I wanted a settlement, I would have called your lawyers, not you. I called you because I wanted to give you the opportunity to see exactly who you humiliated on Saturday night. I wanted you to understand that the waitress you threw money at is the same person who's been building a case against you for 18 months. I wanted you to know that your arrogance has consequences. Get out of my way. You're free to leave any time, though I should mention there are 3 reporters outside who've been following the Ashford development story. They're very interested in your side of things. Victoria's eyes widened. You called the press. I didn't have to. Discrimination lawsuits against major development companies are public record. The press calls me. Diana pulled out her phone and showed Victoria the screen. See? 5 missed calls this morning alone. I've been ignoring them, but after our conversation today, I think I might start returning those calls. This is blackmail. This is transparency. There's a difference, though I understand why you might be confused. Victoria pushed past her toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You have no idea what you're starting. I will destroy you. I will make sure you never work in this city again. You'll what? Diana's voice cut through Victoria's threats like ice. Tear my dress? Throw money at me? Post about me on Instagram? You've already done all of that, Ms. Ashford, and every single action has been documented, screenshotted, and added to our evidence file. So please continue. Every threat you make just strengthens our case. Victoria left without another word, the cafe door slamming behind her. Diana sat back down and finished her coffee, aware of the other patrons staring. Her phone buzzed immediately, Marcus calling. Please tell me you recorded that, he said. Every word, audio and video. Diana, you're either a genius or completely insane. Can't I be both? She could hear him laughing. Get back to the office. We need to prep for Monday. And after that performance, Victoria's lawyers are going to come at us hard. Diana left the cafe and walked the 3 blocks to her office, a modest suite in a building that had seen better decades but housed some of the most dedicated civil rights attorneys in the city. The firm Mitchell and Associates had been her dream since law school. 5 years ago, she'd opened it with nothing but student loan debt and determination. Now it employed 12 people and had a reputation for taking cases that other firms considered too risky or too complicated. Simone was waiting in Diana's office, her expression somewhere between admiration and concern. Girl, you actually did it. You looked Victoria Ashford in the eye and told her you're coming for everything she has. I told her the truth. There's a difference. The truth is about to make your life very complicated. You know she's going to fight dirty. Let her. Diana pulled up the case files on her computer. We have 23 plaintiffs, 4 years of documentation, and now we have real-time evidence of her discriminatory attitudes. She can fight as dirty as she wants. We have the law on our side. And if she comes after you personally, you know she will. Diana thought about her mother, about the houses she'd cleaned for families like the Ashfords, about the quiet dignity she'd maintained even when treated as invisible, about the promise Diana had made at her funeral. Then she comes after me. But I'm not backing down. Over the next 3 days, Victoria made good on her threats. Diana's office received a cease and desist letter claiming harassment. Victoria's lawyers filed a motion to dismiss the case before it was even officially filed. And Victoria herself launched a social media campaign that was equal parts defensive and offensive. Her latest Instagram post showed her in her office looking serious and professional. Being a female CEO means facing constant attacks from people who want to tear down your success. I've built my company through hard work and integrity, and I won't be intimidated by baseless accusations from opportunists looking for a payday. Stand strong. Judge your false claims. Women in business. The comments were divided. Her supporters rallied with messages of encouragement, but others, people who'd clearly been following the story, pushed back with questions Victoria couldn't easily answer. E-Truth Seeker, 2024. Why did 23 employees all leave with similar complaints? Justice matters. Interesting that you call them baseless when the lawsuit hasn't even been filed yet. How do you know what evidence they have? A former employee, ADG. I worked there. Everything they're saying is true. That last comment disappeared within an hour, but not before Diana had screenshotted it and added it to the file. On Friday afternoon, Diana received an unexpected visitor. Robert Pemberton from the Grandview Country Club appeared in her office lobby, looking uncomfortable, in a way that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Miss Mitchell, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to speak with you about Saturday night. Diana invited him into her office, curious. I received your email about the complimentary membership. Yes, about that. Robert shifted in his chair. I need to be honest with you, that email was sent at Mrs. Ashford's insistence. She's on our board, and she was very concerned about potential repercussions from the incident. Repercussions. She told us you were threatening to sue the club. She said you were a professional victim who crashes events looking for opportunities to claim discrimination. Diana raised an eyebrow. And you believed her? At first, yes. But then I did some research. I found your firm's website. I read about your cases, and I realized that Mrs. Ashford had lied to us about who you are and what happened that night. Why are you telling me this? Robert pulled out his phone and showed Diana a video. Because I have security footage from the gala. It clearly shows Mrs. Ashford deliberately tearing your dress. It shows her throwing money at you, and it shows you walking away with more dignity than she's ever displayed in the 15 years she's been a member. Diana watched the footage, her heart racing. Why are you giving this to me? Because I'm tired of people like Victoria Ashford using their money and influence to treat others as less than human. Because I've watched her humiliate staff members for years, and I've said nothing because I needed my job, and because when I saw what she did to you, and then saw how she tried to spin it as your fault, I realized that silence makes me complicit. He forwarded the video to Diana's email. I don't know if this helps your case, but it's yours if you want it. And if you need me to testify about her behavior at club events over the years, I will. After Robert left, Diana sat in her office watching the security footage on repeat. The video was damning. It showed Victoria deliberately stepping on Diana's dress, then pulling the fabric until it tore. It showed her laughing with her friends. It showed the money being thrown, and it showed Diana's face, calm and composed, even as she was being publicly humiliated. Marcus appeared in her doorway. Was that who I think it was? Security footage from the gala. Clear. A video of everything. Diana, this changes everything. With this video, we're not just proving discrimination in the workplace. We're proving a pattern of behavior that goes beyond business. This is personal prejudice caught on camera. Diana forwarded the video to him. Add it to the file. And, Marcus, make sure Victoria's lawyers see it before Monday. I want her to know exactly what's coming. That evening, Diana met with several of the plaintiffs at a small restaurant near her office. Patricia Chen, Jamal Williams, Rosa Martinez, and 5 others who'd agreed to be the public faces of the lawsuit. They'd all seen Victoria's social media posts. They'd all heard about the confrontation at the cafe, and they were all nervous about what Monday would bring. She's going to come after all of us, Patricia said quietly. She has the money to drag this out for years. She does, Diana. Agreed. But we have something she doesn't have. We have the truth, we have documentation, and we have each other. Victoria Ashford is used to fighting individuals who can't afford to fight back. She's not used to facing a united front. Jamal leaned forward. What happened at the gala, when she tore? Your dress, was that planned? No, but it was inevitable. People like Victoria can't help themselves. Give them enough rope, and they'll hang themselves with it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or the wrong place, Rosa added. That must have been humiliating. Diana thought about the moment, about standing in that elegant room with her torn dress and Victoria's laughter echoing off marble floors. It was. But humiliation is temporary. Justice is permanent. And on Monday morning, we're going to show Victoria Ashford what permanent consequences look like. As group dispersed, Diana walked home through streets that were just beginning to show the first signs of evening. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're making a big mistake. Drop the lawsuit, and I'll make sure you're compensated for your trouble. Continue, and I'll destroy everything you've built. VA. Diana screenshot the text, forwarded it to Marcus with the note, add to evidence file, witness intimidation, and then blocked the number. She thought about her mother's hands, worn from years of cleaning other people's homes. She thought about Patricia's voice, shaking as she described being fired for her accent. She thought about Jamal being called aggressive for simply existing in a professional space. She thought about all the people who'd been pushed down, pushed out, pushed aside by people like Victoria Ashford, who believed that power meant the right to hurt others without consequence. And she thought about Monday morning, when 23 stories of discrimination would become public record, when Victoria's carefully constructed image would crack under the weight of documented evidence, when the woman who'd torn a dress because she assumed its owner was powerless would discover that power comes in many forms, and the most dangerous form is the power of truth backed by law. Diana reached her apartment and looked at the white roses Victoria had sent, now wilting in their vase. She'd kept them as a reminder, not of the insult, but of the arrogance, the absolute certainty that a gesture as empty as flowers could erase the damage of deliberate cruelty. On Monday, Victoria Ashford would learn that some things can't be fixed with money or flowers or social media spin. Some things require actual accountability, and Diana was about to deliver that lesson in the most public, most permanent way possible. The only question was whether Victoria would recognize her mistake before the courtroom doors closed behind her, or whether her pride would blind her until the very end. The weekend before the filing felt like the calm before a hurricane. Diana's office had transformed into a war room, with whiteboards covered in timelines, evidence charts, and legal strategies. Marcus had brought in 2 additional attorneys from partner firms, both specialists in employment discrimination law. The conference table was buried under depositions, financial records, and printed emails that painted a damning picture of Ashford Development Group's corporate culture. "Walk me through the structure one more time," Marcus said, standing in front of the main evidence board. It was Saturday morning, and they'd been working since dawn. Diana pointed to the first column. "We're organizing the case into 3 primary categories. First, systematic pay discrimination. We have 4 years of payroll data showing that employees of color consistently earned 15 to 30% less than their white counterparts in identical positions with identical experience levels. And Ashford's defense will be performance-based compensation. They'll claim the pay differences reflect merit, not discrimination." Diana moved to the next column, which is where Category 2 comes in, promotion discrimination. We have 12 employees who were passed over for promotions despite having superior performance reviews, higher client satisfaction ratings, and more years of experience than the white employees who were promoted instead. Simone, who'd been organizing deposition transcripts, looked up. "Don't forget the documentation of Victoria's culture fit assessments. Those are gold." Diana nodded. "Category 3 is hostile work environment and wrongful termination. This is where Victoria's personal behavior becomes central. We have testimony from 17 employees describing specific incidents of racial comments, microaggressions, and outright discrimination. And we have emails from Victoria herself using phrases like cultural misfit, not our demographic, and doesn't represent our brand values. All code for not white enough," Marcus added grimly. "Exactly. And now we have the security. Footage from the gala, her social media posts, and her threatening text message to me. We're not just proving she discriminated in the workplace, we're proving she has a consistent pattern of racist behavior that permeates every aspect of her professional and personal life." One of the partner attorneys, a woman named Catherine Rodriguez, who'd won 3 major discrimination cases in the past 5 years, studied the evidence board with the intensity of a chess master planning her next move. The social media posts are particularly damaging. Juries love social media evidence because it feels authentic. It's not something she said in a deposition under pressure. It's what she chose to share with the world when she thought no one was watching, or when she thought the only people watching would agree with her, Simone corrected. Diana's phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. "Last chance. Name your price. Everyone has a price." She showed it to Marcus, who immediately documented it. "That's the 3rd attempt to buy you off this weekend. She's panicking." "Good. Panic leads to mistakes." As if on cue, Diana's phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from Instagram. Victoria had posted yet another message, and this one was a masterclass in self-destruction. "To everyone asking about the lawsuit, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Opportunists who see successful people and immediately look for ways to profit from false accusations. I've built my company on merit and fairness. Every employee who's ever left Ashford Development did so because they couldn't meet our high standards. I will not apologize for excellence. No settlement, fighting back, John, our merit matters." The comments section was already exploding. Former employees were coming out of the woodwork, sharing their own stories. Current employees were posting anonymous accounts, and legal experts were pointing out that Victoria was essentially admitting she'd fired multiple employees, which would make it very easy to establish a pattern. "She's doing our job for us," Catherine observed. "At this rate, we won't need opening statements. We'll just show the jury her Instagram feed." But Diana felt a knot of tension in her stomach that had nothing to do with the case. She walked to the window of her office, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Victoria Ashford was probably in her penthouse, surrounded by expensive lawyers who were desperately trying to control the damage their client kept inflicting on herself. "You okay?" Simone appeared beside her. "I keep thinking about what happens after. When we win, and we will win, what happens to all those people who worked for her? The ones who are still there, who couldn't afford to leave, who need their jobs. We're including provisions for workplace reform in the lawsuit. If we win, Ashford Development will be required to implement oversight, diversity training, and regular audits. It's not perfect, but it's something. And Victoria? Victoria will learn that actions have consequences. That's more than most people in her position ever learn. Sunday afternoon brought an unexpected development. Diana received a call from Jennifer Kim, one of Victoria's friends from the gala, the one who'd looked uncomfortable during the dress incident. "Ms. Mitchell, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the court filing that went public this morning." Diana's heart raced. They'd filed the preliminary paperwork early to beat Victoria's motion to dismiss. "How can I help you, Ms. Kim?" "I want to testify about Victoria, about what I've seen over the years." Jennifer's voice was shaky but determined. "I've known her since college. I've watched her treat people terribly and justify it as high standards or business necessity. What she did to you at the gala, that wasn't an isolated incident. That's who she is. Ms. Kim, you understand that testifying against a friend could have social consequences for you? She's not my friend. I've just been too much of a coward to admit it until now. When I saw that video of her tearing your dress and then saw her posting on social media, like she was the victim, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Silence is complicity." Diana thought about Robert Pemberton saying almost the exact same thing. "We'd be grateful for your testimony. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" After the call ended, Marcus let out a low whistle. "One of Victoria's inner circle is flipping. This is huge." "It's more than huge," Catherine said. "It means the people closest to her are recognizing that she's indefensible. That's when cases stop being about legal arguments and start being about moral clarity." That evening, Diana met with the full group of plaintiffs at her office. All 23 were there, along with several family members who'd supported them through the ordeal. The room was crowded, emotional, and charged with an energy that felt like hope, mixed with fear. Patricia Chen stood first. "I just want to say thank you for believing us, for taking this case when other lawyers said it was too risky, for putting yourself on the line." "I'm not on the line," Diana said. "We're all on the line together. That's what makes this powerful. Victoria Ashford is used to picking off individuals one at a time. She's not used to facing a united front." Jamal Williams raised his hand. "What happens if we lose?" The question hung in the air. Diana could have given them false reassurance, could have promised victory with absolute certainty, but these people deserved the truth. If we lose, we appeal, and if we lose the appeal, we take the fight to the court of public opinion. We make sure everyone knows what Ashford Development Group did. We make sure no one else has to go through what you went through." "But Jamal," Diana met his eyes, "we're not going to lose. I've been practicing law for 10 years, and I've never seen a case this solid. We have documentation, we have witnesses, we have video evidence, and we have Victoria's own words condemning her. The law is on our side." "And if she tries to settle?" Rosa Martinez asked. "Then we negotiate terms that include real reform, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and compensation that reflects the damage done. But based on her social media posts, I don't think Victoria Ashford is in a settling mood." As if the universe wanted to prove Diana right, her phone lit up with another notification. Victoria had gone live on Instagram, and over 3,000 people were watching. Diana pulled up the stream on her laptop, and the room fell silent as Victoria's face filled the screen. She was in her office, perfectly styled, with the Ashford Development logo visible behind her. "I want to address the rumors and accusations that have been circulating," Victoria began, her voice steady and confident. "Tomorrow, a lawsuit will be officially filed against my company by a group of former employees who are claiming discrimination. I want to be absolutely clear. These claims are false, they are motivated by financial gain, and they will be proven baseless in court." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "I've spent 15 years building Ashford Development Group into one of the most successful companies in this city. I've created jobs, I've contributed to the community, and I've maintained the highest standards of professionalism. I will not allow my reputation or my company's reputation to be destroyed by people who are simply looking for a payday." Someone in Diana's office muttered, "She really doesn't know when to stop talking." Victoria continued, "To the attorney leading this case, Ms. Mitchell, I want to say this directly. You may have fooled some people with your victim narrative, but you don't fool me. I know exactly what you're doing. This is a shakedown, pure and simple, and I will fight you with every resource I have." The live stream ended. The room was silent for a moment, then erupted in angry voices. "She just called us liars on camera. She's acting like we're the criminals. How can she be so delusional?" Diana raised her hand for quiet. "This is good." "Good?" Patricia looked incredulous. "She just called us all frauds to 3,000 people. She called us frauds on a recorded live stream that we can now use as evidence. She claimed the allegations are baseless before seeing our evidence. She threatened me directly, and she did all of it in a public forum that shows her state of mind." Diana looked around the room. "Victoria Ashford just handed us more ammunition. Every word she speaks, every post she makes, every threat she issues, it all goes into our case file. She's so convinced of her own righteousness that she can't see she's building our case for us." Marcus was already downloading the live stream. "I'll have this transcribed and added to the evidence. File by tonight." The meeting continued for another hour, going over final preparations, discussing what to expect when the case went public, and preparing the plaintiffs for the media attention that would inevitably follow. By the time everyone left, it was nearly midnight. Diana, Marcus, Simone, and Catherine remained in the office, doing final reviews of the filing documents. The lawsuit was 247 pages long, with another 500 pages of supporting evidence. It detailed every incident, every discriminatory policy, every racist comment, and every wrongful termination. It was comprehensive, devastating, and irrefutable. "This is it," Marcus said, his finger hovering over the submit button on the electronic filing system. "Once I hit this, there's no going back. Victoria's lawyers will have the full case file within minutes. The press will have it within hours. By tomorrow morning, this will be the biggest story in the city." Diana thought about the moment at the gala when Victoria had torn her dress. She thought about the casual cruelty, the assumption that some people simply didn't matter. She thought about her mother's hands, worn from years of invisible labor. She thought about Patricia's voice shaking as she described being fired for her accent. She thought about every person who'd ever been made to feel less than human by people who believed their money and status gave them that right. "Do it," Diana said. Marcus hit submit. The confirmation screen appeared. Filing. Accepted. Case number 2024 CV 8847. Mitchell et al. v. Ashford Development Group, Inc. and Victoria Ashford, individually. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Simone started laughing, not from humor, but from the sheer release of tension. "We actually did it. We're actually taking on Victoria Ashford." "We're not taking her on," Diana corrected. "We're holding her accountable. There's a difference." Catherine checked her phone. "Victoria's lawyers just received the notification. I'm guessing we'll hear from them within the hour." She was wrong. They heard from Victoria's lawyers within 20 minutes. The email was terse and threatening, promising a vigorous defense and hinting at counterclaims for defamation and harassment. Diana forwarded it to Marcus with a single word: expected. At 1:47 a.m., Diana finally left her office and walked to her car, through streets that were quiet except for the occasional taxi. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from an unknown number that she knew was Victoria. "You have no idea what you've started. I will destroy you." Diana didn't respond. She didn't need to, because in approximately 6 hours, when the courthouse opened and the press got hold of the case file, Victoria Ashford would discover that the destruction she'd promised was already happening to her own carefully constructed world. If you're still following this journey of justice and accountability, you'll want to stay tuned for what happens when Victoria finally realizes that the woman she dismissed as a waitress is actually the architect of her downfall. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or dramatic, it's simply the truth, delivered with precision and backed by the full force of the law. Diana drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, her mind already moving to the next phase. The filing was just the beginning. The real battle would start when Victoria's lawyers began their defense, when depositions turned into confrontations, when the case moved from paperwork to courtroom. But for now, in this quiet moment between action and consequence, Diana allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in 18 months. Certainty. Not hope, not optimism, but absolute certainty that justice was no longer a distant goal. It was a filed lawsuit, a documented case, a public record that couldn't be erased or bought off or intimidated into silence. Victoria Ashford had torn a dress because she assumed its owner was powerless. Tomorrow, she would begin to understand just how wrong that assumption had been. Monday morning arrived with the force of a tidal wave. By 6 a.m., 3 major news outlets had published stories about the lawsuit. By 7 a.m., Victoria Ashford's name was trending on social media. By 8 a.m., protesters had gathered outside Ashford Development Group's headquarters with signs reading, "Justice for the 23s" and "Racism isn't a business model." Diana watched the news coverage from her office. Marcus standing beside her with his arms crossed and a satisfied expression on his face. Channel 7 just called it the most comprehensive discrimination case filed in the state in over a decade, he reported. They're running segments on each of the plaintiffs. Patricia's interview is particularly powerful. On screen, Patricia Chen sat across from a news anchor, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "I gave that company 3 years of my life. I worked 60-hour weeks. I brought in millions in revenue. And I was fired because Victoria Ashford decided my face didn't match her idea of what success should look like." The anchor leaned forward. "And you're one of 23 plaintiffs? 23 people brave enough to come forward, but there are dozens more who are too afraid to speak up. That's what Victoria Ashford created, a culture of fear where people of color knew they could be fired at any moment for any reason, and there would be no consequences." Diana's phone had been ringing non-stop since dawn. Interview requests, messages of support from other civil rights attorneys, and calls from former Ashford Development employees who wanted to add their stories to the case. At 9:15 a.m., Victoria's legal team held a press conference. Diana watched it live, studying every word, every gesture, every crack in the carefully constructed facade. Victoria stood at a podium flanked by 4 attorneys, her expression a mixture of defiance and barely controlled rage. "These allegations are completely false and motivated entirely by financial opportunism. My company has always operated with the highest ethical standards. We have never discriminated against anyone based on race, and we will prove that in court." A reporter shouted a question. "Ms. Ashford, how do you explain the security footage from the Grandview Country Club showing you deliberately tearing Ms. Mitchell's dress?" Victoria's jaw tightened. That incident has been taken completely out of context. It was an accident that's being weaponized by an attorney looking to make a name for herself. An accident that you then posted about on Instagram, calling it an example of people not knowing their place? "I never said that. We have screenshots." Victoria's lead attorney stepped forward. "This press conference is about the lawsuit, not about social media posts taken out of context." Next question. But the damage was done. The reporters had scented blood, and they weren't backing down. "Ms. Ashford, 17 former employees have testified that you used phrases like cultural misfit and not our demographic when firing them. How do you respond?" "Those are business Terms, they have nothing to do with race. Then why were all 17 employees people of color? Victoria's composure cracked. This is a witch hunt. I'm being targeted because I'm a successful woman who refuses to lower her standards. If that makes me guilty of something, then our entire justice system is broken. The press conference ended abruptly, with Victoria's attorneys practically dragging her away from the podium. Within minutes, clips of her defensive, angry responses were circulating online, each one more damaging than the last. At 10:30 a.m., Diana received a call from Jennifer. Kim, Victoria's former friend who'd agreed to testify. "Have you seen the news?" Jennifer's voice was shaking. "Victoria just called me. She was screaming. She said I betrayed her, that I'm a traitor, that she'll make sure I'm socially destroyed." "Did you record the call?" "Yes. You told me to record everything. Send it to me. That's witness intimidation, and it's a crime." By noon, the financial impact was becoming visible. Ashford Development Group's stock had dropped 18%. 3 major clients had issued statements distancing themselves from the company. 2 board members had resigned, and the company's largest investor had called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership concerns. Diana was in a strategy session with her legal team when Simone burst into the conference room. "You need to see this. Now." She pulled up a news broadcast on the large screen. A reporter stood outside Ashford Development headquarters, where the crowd of protesters had grown to over 200 people. "We're receiving reports that several current Ashford Development employees have walked out in solidarity with the plaintiffs. We're also hearing that the company's HR director has resigned and is cooperating with the investigation." Marcus let out a low whistle. "The HR director? That's huge. She'll have access to everything, every complaint that was filed and ignored, every discriminatory policy, every internal communication." Diana's phone rang. It was Catherine. It was Rodriguez. "Diana, you're not going to believe this. Victoria's lawyers just contacted me. They want to discuss settlement terms." "Already? The lawsuit was filed less than 12 hours ago. They're panicking. The stock drop, the client defections, the media coverage. It's all happening faster than they anticipated. They want to contain this before it gets worse." "What are they offering?" "They didn't say. They want to meet this afternoon. But Diana, I think we should hold off. Every hour that passes, more evidence comes out, more people come forward, and Victoria's position gets weaker. If we wait, we can negotiate from an even stronger position." Diana thought about the 23 plaintiffs who'd trusted her with their stories. "Set up the meeting, but make it clear we're listening, not negotiating. Not yet." At 2 p.m., Diana and her legal team met with Victoria's attorneys in a neutral conference room downtown. Victoria herself wasn't present. Her lawyers had apparently convinced her that showing up would be a tactical error. The lead attorney, a man named Richard Thornton, who'd built his career defending corporations against discrimination claims, looked exhausted. "Let's be frank, this case is damaging my client's business and reputation. We're prepared to offer a substantial settlement to make this go away quietly." "How substantial?" Marcus asked. $2 million, divided among the plaintiffs. In exchange, they sign NDAs and agree not to discuss the case. Publicly, Diana didn't even need to consult with her team. "No," Thornton blinked. "I'm sorry? Your client spent years destroying people's careers and dignity. She fired them, humiliated them, and then tried to silence them. And now you want to pay them to stay silent? No, this case is going to trial. Ms. Mitchell, be reasonable. $2 million is a generous offer. It's hush money, and it doesn't include any admission of wrongdoing, any policy changes, or any accountability for Victoria Ashford personally. You're asking us to let her buy her way out of consequences. That's not justice. Then what do you want?" Diana leaned forward. "I want a public admission of discriminatory practices. I want Victoria Ashford to step down as CEO. I want independent oversight of the company's hiring and promotion practices for the next 5 years. I want compensation for the plaintiffs that reflects the actual damage done to their careers, not a number designed to make your client's stock price recover. And I want it all on public record, not hidden behind NDAs. Thornton's expression hardened. You're asking for my client to destroy her own company. I'm asking for accountability. If that destroys her company, then her company deserves to be destroyed. The meeting ended with no agreement. As Diana and her team left the building, they were met by a crowd of reporters. Ms. Mitchell, can you comment on the settlement discussions? Diana stopped, considering her words carefully. Ashford Development Group has offered money in exchange for silence. We've declined. This case isn't about money. It's about justice, accountability, and ensuring that what happened to our clients never happens to anyone else. What do you say to people who claim this is just about getting a payday? I'd say they should read the 247-page lawsuit that documents years of systematic discrimination. I'd say they should listen to the 17 people who've testified about being called cultural misfits. I'd say they should watch the security footage of Victoria Ashford deliberately tearing my dress because she assumed I was a waitress, and then I'd ask them if they still think this is about money. The clip went viral within an hour. By 5 p.m., the situation had escalated beyond anything Diana had anticipated. A whistleblower from inside Ashford Development had leaked internal emails to the press, emails that showed Victoria explicitly instructing her HR department to find reasons to terminate employees who didn't fit the company image. One email, sent just 6 months earlier, was particularly damning. I don't care what excuse you use, but I want the diversity hires gone by end of quarter. They're bringing down the culture we've worked so hard to build. Find performance issues, create documentation if you need to, but get it done. The news anchors could barely hide their shock as they read the emails on air. Legal experts were calling it smoking gun evidence. Former employees were coming forward in droves, each with their own story of discrimination and retaliation. At 6:30 p.m., Diana received a call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered, "You're destroying me." Victoria's voice was raw, stripped of all its earlier confidence. "Everything I've built, my company, my reputation, my life, you're destroying all of it." "No, Ms. Ashford, you destroyed it yourself. I'm just making sure everyone can see what you did. I offered you money. I offered you a settlement. What more do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to feel what Patricia felt when you fired her for her accent. I want you to experience what Jamal experienced when you called him aggressive for simply existing. I want you to know what it's like to be judged, dismissed, and destroyed by someone who has power over you. This isn't justice, this is revenge." Diana's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "Justice and revenge aren't mutually exclusive, Ms. Ashford. Sometimes they're the same thing. The difference is that justice is earned and revenge is deserved. You've earned both. I'll fight you, I'll appeal, I'll drag this out for years. You're welcome to try. But every day this case continues, more evidence comes out, more people come forward, more of your world crumbles. You can fight or you can accept responsibility. Either way, the outcome is the same." Victoria hung up without another word. That evening, Diana met with all 23 plaintiffs at her office. The mood was electric, a mixture of vindication, relief, and disbelief that their stories were finally being heard. "I never thought this would actually happen," Rosa Martinez said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought people like Victoria Ashford were untouchable." "No one is untouchable," Diana replied. "Some people just have better armor. But armor can be pierced if you know where to aim." Jamal raised his glass of champagne. Simone had insisted on celebrating. "To Diana Mitchell, who aimed perfectly." "To all of us," Diana corrected. "This victory belongs to everyone who had the courage to speak up. I just gave you the platform." At 9:47 p.m., as Diana was finally preparing to go home, her phone lit up with a breaking news alert. Breaking! Victoria Ashford resigns as CEO of Ashford Development Group. Board of Directors announces independent investigation into discrimination claims. Diana read the statement that accompanied the resignation. It was carefully worded, admitting nothing while promising everything. But buried in the corporate language was a single sentence that mattered. Ms. Ashford will be stepping down effective immediately to allow the company to move forward. Marcus appeared in her doorway. We won. Not yet. She resigned, but she hasn't admitted wrongdoing. The company is still fighting the lawsuit. This is damage control, not accountability. Diana, the CEO of a major development company, just resigned in disgrace less than 24 hours after we filed. Her reputation is destroyed. Her company is in chaos. Her friends are abandoning her. What more do you want? Diana thought about the moment at the gala, about Victoria's casual cruelty and absolute certainty that she would face no consequences. She thought about the $40 thrown on the floor like she was a beggar. She thought about the Instagram posts mocking her, the threatening texts, the assumption that money could buy silence. I want her to understand, Diana said quietly. I want her to truly understand what she did and why it was wrong. Resignation isn't understanding. It's just another escape. Then we keep fighting. We take this to trial. We make sure the full story comes out in court, under oath, on public record. Diana nodded. We keep fighting. We keep. But as she drove home that night, past news vans still camped outside Ashford Development headquarters, past protesters who'd stayed long after dark, past billboards that would soon be advertising a company without its founder, Diana allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Victoria Ashford had torn a dress because she assumed its owner was powerless. Now, less than a week later, she'd lost her company, her reputation, and her carefully constructed image of success. She'd learned that power comes in many forms, and the most dangerous form is the power of truth, wielded by someone who refuses to be silenced. The case wasn't over. The trial would be long and brutal, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Victoria Ashford had already lost everything that mattered to her. The trial would just make it official. And somewhere in her penthouse apartment, surrounded by lawyers and crisis management consultants, Victoria was finally beginning to understand that the woman she'd dismissed as a waitress had been the architect of her destruction all along. 6 months later, Diana stood in front of a federal courthouse on a crisp spring morning, surrounded by all 23 plaintiffs and a crowd of supporters that had grown far beyond anything she'd imagined. The trial had lasted 8 weeks. 8 weeks of testimony, evidence and revelations that had kept the case in headlines across the country. 8 weeks of watching Victoria Ashford's defense crumble under the weight of documented discrimination, leaked emails, and witness after witness describing a culture of systematic racism. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours. In the matter of Mitchell et al. V. Ashford Development Group Inc. and Victoria Ashford, individually we find in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. The verdict had come down 3 days ago, but Diana was still processing the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. The jury had awarded $47 million in compensatory and punitive damages, one of the largest discrimination settlements in state history. More importantly, the judge had ordered sweeping reforms: independent oversight, mandatory diversity training, transparent promotion processes, and a 5-year monitoring period. But the real victory wasn't the money or the reforms. It was standing here, watching Patricia Chen give an interview to a national news network, her voice strong and clear as she described what justice felt like after years of being silenced. This case changed everything, Patricia was saying, not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong, that they're not good enough, that they should know their place. Today, we proved that everyone belongs, and the only people who don't belong are those who use their power to hurt others. Diana's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. CNN wants you for their evening segment. Also, 3 more companies have reached out about discrimination audits. We're going to need to hire more attorneys. Mitchell and Associates had transformed over the past 6 months. What had started as a small firm with 12 employees now occupied an entire floor of a downtown building and employed 32 people. Diana had been featured in legal journals, invited to speak at law, schools, and approached by major firms offering partnerships that would have seemed impossible a year ago. She turned them all down. This work, fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, was exactly where she belonged. "Ms. Mitchell," a young woman approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you. I worked for a company similar to Ashford Development. After seeing your case, I finally had the courage to file a complaint with HR. They're actually investigating now. Your case gave me hope that things could change." Diana took the woman's hand. "They can change. They are changing, but only if people like you keep speaking up." Across town, in a much different setting, Victoria Ashford sat in her attorney's office, reviewing bankruptcy documents. The $47 million judgment had been personally devastating. The jury had found her individually liable, which meant her personal assets were on the line. Her penthouse was being sold, her art collection had been auctioned, her investment portfolio had been liquidated, but the financial loss was nothing compared to the social destruction. Her friends had abandoned her. Her country club membership had been voluntarily resigned. Invitations to charity galas had stopped coming. The social circles she'd spent decades cultivating had closed their doors, not out of moral outrage, but out of self-preservation. Being associated with Victoria Ashford had become toxic. Ashford Development Group had survived, but barely. Under new leadership, the company had implemented every reform the court ordered and several more besides. They'd issued a public apology, established a victims' compensation fund, and rebranded entirely. The Ashford name had been quietly removed from the company logo. Victoria's attorney, Richard Thornton, slid another document across the desk. "This is the final settlement for the remaining civil suits. 3 more former employees have come forward since the verdict. How much? Another $2 million. But Miss Ashford, I have to advise you. I know, I'm broke. I get it." Victoria's voice was hollow, stripped of the confidence that had once defined her. "How did this happen? How did one lawsuit destroy everything?" Thornton looked at her with something that might have been pity. "It wasn't one lawsuit. It was years of behavior that the lawsuit exposed. Ms. Mitchell didn't destroy you. She just made sure everyone could see what you'd been doing all along." Victoria thought about that night at the gala, about the woman in the torn dress who'd looked at her with such calm dignity. She'd assumed Diana Mitchell was nobody, nothing, someone who could be dismissed and forgotten. That assumption had cost her everything. "I want to appeal," Victoria said, though even she could hear the defeat in her voice. "We've discussed this. An appeal would cost money you don't have, and it would keep you in the public eye for another year. The best thing you can do now is accept the judgment, fulfill your obligations, and try to rebuild your life quietly." Quietly. Victoria Ashford, who'd spent her entire life being loud, being seen, being important, was being advised to disappear. Meanwhile, Diana was at a celebration dinner with all 23 plaintiffs and their families. The private room at an upscale restaurant was filled with laughter, tears, and the kind of joy that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you. Jamal Williams stood to make a toast. "A year ago, I was unemployed, blacklisted, and convinced that speaking up had been the biggest mistake of my life. Today I have a new job that pays 40% more than Ashford ever did. I'm working with people who respect me, and I'm part of a case that's literally changing employment law. None of that would have happened without Diana Mitchell." The room erupted in applause. Diana felt her eyes burning with tears. She refused to let fall. "I didn't do this alone," she said when the noise died down. Every single person in this room took a risk. You trusted me with your stories, your pain, your hope for justice. You stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. This victory belongs to all of us. Rosa Martinez raised her glass. To Diana, who taught us that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting justice. Later that evening, Diana returned to her office to find a letter waiting on her desk. It had been hand-delivered. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page, written in Victoria's distinctive script. Ms. Mitchell, I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see before. You weren't trying to destroy me. You were trying to stop me from destroying others. I spent my entire life believing that success meant being better than everyone else, when it should have meant lifting others up. I lost everything, my company, my reputation, my friends, my fortune, and I deserve to lose it all, not because of what you did, but because of what I did. The lawsuit didn't ruin my life. My choices ruined my life. You just made sure I couldn't hide from those choices anymore. I don't know what happens next for me, but I hope that somewhere, somehow, the pain I cause can lead to something better for others. That's the only redemption I can imagine. I'm sorry for everything. Victoria Ashford. Diana read the letter twice, then filed it away. It wasn't forgiveness. Victoria was right about that. But it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that was enough. 3 months later, Diana was invited to speak at her law school's graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of young faces about to enter the legal profession, she thought about her own graduation, about the mountain of debt and the uncertainty of whether she'd ever make a difference. When I started practicing law, Diana began, I thought justice was about winning cases, about being the smartest person in the room, about never losing an argument. But I've learned that justice is about something much simpler and much harder. It's about seeing people who've been made invisible and making sure they're seen. It's about hearing voices that have been silenced and amplifying them until they can't be ignored. 6 months ago, I stood in a federal courthouse with 23 people who'd been told they didn't matter. Today, their case is being taught in law schools across the country. Their courage changed. Employment law, their willingness to speak up, created protections for thousands of workers who will never know their names. That's what justice looks like. Not revenge, not destruction, but transformation. Taking pain and turning it into progress. Taking injustice and turning it into accountability. Some of you will go on to work for big firms, defending corporations and making a lot of money. That's fine. But I challenge you to remember that the law isn't just a tool for the powerful. It's a shield for the vulnerable. And the most important cases you'll ever work on won't be the ones that make you rich. They'll be the ones that make you human. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, dozens of students approached her, asking about internships, about civil rights law, about how to make a difference. Diana gave them all the same advice her mother had given her. Get your education. Make sure you're the one with the power to say no, and then use that power to help people who can't say no for themselves. A year after the verdict, Diana received an unexpected invitation. The Grandview Country Club, the same venue where Victoria had torn her dress, was hosting an award ceremony honoring leaders in civil rights. Diana was being given their inaugural Justice Award. She almost declined. The irony was almost too much, but Marcus convinced her to accept. You're not going there for them, he said. You're going there to show every person of color who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong that they do belong. Everywhere, always. So Diana returned to the Grandview Country Club, this time walking through the main entrance to applause instead of stairs. Robert Pemberton, the events director who'd given her the security footage, was there to greet her. Ms. Mitchell, I can't tell you how much this means to us. Your case forced us to examine our own practices, our own biases. We've implemented new membership policies, diversity training for all staff, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. You changed this place." Diana accepted the award, a crystal sculpture that probably cost more than her first car, and gave a brief speech about the importance of accountability and the power of speaking truth to privilege. But the moment that mattered most came afterward, when a young black woman who worked as a server approached her nervously. "Ms. Mitchell, I just wanted to say thank you. Before your case, I was invisible here. People would snap their fingers at me, talk over me, treat me like furniture. But after everything that happened with Ms. Ashford, things changed. People started seeing me, actually seeing me. It did that." Diana hugged her, this stranger who represented everyone she'd been fighting for. "You were always visible. Some people just needed to learn how to see." 2 years after the verdict, Diana received one final piece of news about Victoria Ashford. She'd moved to a small town in another state, taken a job as a consultant for companies trying to improve their diversity practices, and was living quietly, almost anonymously. Some people said it was fitting. The woman who'd destroyed careers was now helping rebuild them. Others said it was too little, too late. Diana didn't have an opinion either way. Victoria's redemption, if it was real, was between Victoria and the people she'd hurt. Diana's focus was on the future. Mitchell and Associates had become one of the most respected civil rights firms in the country. The Ashford case had opened doors, created opportunities, and inspired a new generation of attorneys to fight for justice instead of just fighting for billable hours. But more than that, it had proven something Diana's mother had always believed, that dignity couldn't be bought, sold, or torn away. That power came not from money or status, but from the courage to stand up and say, "This is wrong," even when everyone else was saying, "This is just how things are." On the 2nd anniversary of the verdict, Diana visited her mother's grave. She brought flowers, not white roses like Victoria had sent, but her mother's favorites, bright yellow sunflowers that turned toward the light. "We won, Mama," Diana said quietly. "Not just the case, but something bigger. We proved that people like us, people who clean houses and work 3 jobs and sacrifice everything for their children, we matter. Our dignity matters, our humanity matters, and anyone who tries to take that away will face consequences." The wind rustled through the trees, and Diana could almost hear her mother's voice. "Baby, you didn't just win a case, you changed the world. One lawsuit at a time, one voice at a time, one act of courage at a time. That's how change happens." Diana left the cemetery and drove to her office, where a new case was waiting, another company, another pattern of discrimination, another group of people who'd been told they didn't matter. The work was never finished. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a constant journey. But as she walked into her office, past the framed newspaper articles about the Ashford case, past the photos of all 23 plaintiffs on the day of the verdict, past the awards and recognition that had followed, Diana felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because the fight was over, but because she'd proven that the fight could be won. Victoria Ashford had torn a dress because she assumed its owner was powerless. She'd learned in the most devastating way possible that power comes in many forms, and the most dangerous form is the power of someone who refuses to be invisible, refuses to be silent, and refuses to accept that injustice is just how things are. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's becoming so successful, so impactful, so undeniably important that they have to watch you thrive while they face the consequences of their own cruelty. It's proving that their assessment of you was wrong, their treatment of you was unjust, and their assumption that they'd face no consequences was the biggest mistake they ever made. Diana Mitchell had been dismissed as a waitress. Now she was a symbol of justice, a champion for the voiceless, and living proof that underestimating someone based on the color of their skin is the fastest way to discover just how wrong you can be. And if you've been following this journey from a torn dress at a charity gala to a landmark civil rights victory, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove justice isn't just a concept. It's a choice we make every day to stand up, speak out, and refuse to accept that some people matter more than others. Because the most powerful stories aren't about revenge. They're about transformation, accountability, and the unshakable truth that dignity cannot be torn, bought, or silenced. Victoria Ashford learned that lesson the hard way. And somewhere, in a modest office in a city that had once tried to make her invisible, Diana Mitchell was making sure no one else would have to learn it the same way. Justice had been served, and it tasted like victory.